Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Daily AI Show. Today is February 16th, 2026, episode 661. Or are we already above that, Beth? Did I go one low? Anyway, doesn't matter. We're in the 660s or 670s.
Nope.
But welcome to the show. Glad you're here. If you're in the States and you perhaps have today off, I do. For President's Day, it's a holiday here, but not everybody has it all the time. It's not one of the major ones. So I'm certainly enjoying a day off. Also happens to be my wife's birthday. So fun day around the Misseri household. Today. With me, as always, is not as always, but today is Andy and Beth. And I'm Brian, and we lost our cards again. Beth, I don't know. That's a toggle. I don't know how we lose it so fast. It was on when we started. Show comments on stage. Anyway, I'm not sure what gets hit that disappears on us, but we'll bring it back. We'll have it on there. Thank you for those who are saying happy birthday to Amanda. That's my wife. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. I will pass that along. And then, yeah, we're one of those families where our birthdays, we weirdly have friends that are like this too, where our birthdays are really close to each other. So Amanda's birthday is today and my birthday is on Wednesday. And so we always, which is nice because then we're able to just quickly say, Valentine's Day doesn't matter because our birthdays come within several days of it or whatever. And it's nice because we can just kind of kick that off to the curb and just focus on birthdays. So, welcome everybody. Thanks to see everybody in the, wow, we have a lot of people in the comments already. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Beth says this is episode 661. Thank you, Beth. I second guessed myself as I was saying it. All right. Well, listen, we always like to kind of kick things off, especially coming out of the weekends, excuse me. There's usually things that have hit, and Beth, you were the first one to tell me about it. So I figure, why don't you tell us a little bit about Open Claw AI, Open AI Claw, Open. Can we merge them together? Open AI Claw, maybe. What's going on with that? What happened over the last, I think, 24 hours?
Yeah. So it was. Am I rumored? Am I?
You were
muted?
super delayed
Sorry.
there for a second, like old school. Aaron
Okay.
delayed.
I think. I think my system is having trouble, but it was rumored to have been happening for a while, and it was rumored that that Peter, who is the creator of OpenClaw, was in talks with, I believe, Meta as well, right? People reached out and said, hey, let's do the thing. And it was announced yesterday, and there was a point on X, if you were on X at that like everything was boom. Everybody came out, hey, this has happened. Hey, this is going to happen. Look like it happened. Here we go. And Sam and Greg, Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, announced that they're excited to work with him. The structure appears to be a new commitment to open source. So OpenClaw is going to stay open source, and they're going to create an initiative of moving further in that direction. That's what I got out of it. Andy, what do you got?
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yes, I do have some to add about this one. I think we've just observed, setting aside the screwy way that these acqui-hires are happening. Remember back to when NVIDIA bought, but really didn't buy Grok, right? They're doing these weird structures probably to avoid, I don't know, some complications that I'm not clear about. But I think we just observed the first single product, single developer, billionaire, exit, right? So the compensation, which was not disclosed,
right,
for hiring Peter Steinberger, because they didn't acquire his company. Like he has a company, right? He's developed things, right? He has a company. They didn't buy his company, and they basically just hired him with a huge package, I'm sure, that is multi-billions of dollars, given just the velocity and the importance of this product to the agent ecosystem that's emerging. They gave him a big payday to come on board with OpenAI. And so he's got grants and options and everything else. And that was the compensation structure, probably. And as a result of that, we can't say that there was an acquisition that took place. No acquisition took place. There was no company acquired, but there was a foundation promise created by OpenAI to put this thing that Peter built for the purposes of having an open source thing out there available to everybody, to put it in a foundation run by OpenAI, to keep it separate from the for-profit interests of OpenAI. But Peter Steinberger is going to be like leading the charge for sort of individual agents in the product group, probably under Fujimoto at OpenAI. So yes, Meta and OpenAI were kind of the final players who were negotiating with Peter to do some kind of deal that would bring him into their fold. But I also read somewhere that every single major VC was in Peter Steinberger's inbox.
Yeah, right? I saw that.
They were all ready to give him big money to let them take on the sort of the private initiative of developing OpenClaw going forward. So what does this mean for OpenAI? Well, you'll probably see OpenClaw's approach, like that structure, integrated into ChatGPT. So your AI assistant will be able to automatically manage your calendar and handle tasks and so on, control your smart home, do research for you in the background, anticipating your needs, all of those things that an autonomous and continuously learning agent, which is kind of what OpenClaw represents in my mind at this point, is able to do. And Peter Steinberger himself said that he believes that OpenClaw could replace ultimately the vast majority of apps that you use on your phone, because you'll just talk to OpenClaw as your agent and it'll do what you want it to do without you having to have a special app for that. So it has really big disruptive capability, and it'll be in the field of OpenAI, to deliver those products and to package them in a way that many, many more consumers than might otherwise use OpenClaw will have access to it.
Yeah, and I think, just to add some more speculation than anything is like, I think I read the same thing you did, because I saw the thing about the inbox and the VC firms, and another part of this that Beth had brought up about how Mark Zuckerberg was, apparently, allegedly, we don't know for sure, courting him as well, pretty heavily, and he ultimately went to OpenAI. The suggestion in the news, like the Neuron or maybe the rundown, was saying lured with early access to newer models, which you can imagine might be something he cares about. If you want to be a person in the know, that could be a really big carrot to dangle, because if you're inside of OpenAI, you may know the next 2 or 3 models that are being produced, some that'll never see the light of day because of whatever reasons. We know that these things happen, and if you're working on the agents. The other thing I'll say is I'm excited to see how this rolls out into like what we know as custom GPTs. I think most people, as powerful as custom GPTs are, even at this point, I would say there should be some successor to it. There should have been something that's more agent focused, even at this point. I think OpenClaw, and what I've been just lightly playing around with my Claw, that AI, which, just for anybody listening to this, that is the standalone SaaS version of my Claw that does not require you to go to a terminal. It automatically sets up a virtual private server. It keeps everything separate, and away you go. You're still in sort of like a chat mode, but it has this persistent memory. Now, I have found that the persistent memory is the problem, because it chews through just tokens like there's no tomorrow. Like it's Cookie Monster. It's like insane. And so I'm watching I put $10 at it, from Claude Opus, and then dropped it down to Sonnet. And even at Sonnet, my Claude would come back to me with an answer, and the dollar amount would move by $2. You got to think to yourself, like, how many tokens do you have to throw to move $2 on Sonnet. A haiku obviously would be less, but still, that's, you and I do this enough to know that that's a massive move. And anyway, my claw has said, look, it's because of the way I always read my basically memory files every single time. So to me, what I want to see is the sort of the genius of what we saw with my claw and why that was such a big deal, and people made such a big deal about it 2 or 3 weeks ago, with what OpenAI has been able to do. And I hope what that ends up being is the predecessor to custom GPTs, where you are, to your point, Andy, interacting and reaching out to different agents, or agents on your behalf are doing things, which is a level up of here's a system prompt and here are some knowledge documents. It's more like here's knowledge, here's persistent memory, here's a connector to a whole bunch of other agents going on. And then, as I was showing you and Beth off camera with something I was fooling around with, this idea of them all coming in together to solve a common problem. So very, very interesting. A big get, I think. I mean, from what I can tell from OpenAI. But to your point, what was the compensation package above and beyond lots of compute and maybe early access to models? Surely that wasn't it. When you have every VC banging down your door.
There's dollars involved.
And we already know what Mark Zuckerberg does. He dangles a lot of money in front of people. So you have to imagine that was part of it too. So I don't know. More to come there.
I want to differentiate OpenClaw, which is the open source standard for the Peter Steinberger developed, autonomous agent system, and myclaw.ai, which is a cloud-based 24/7 access to an OpenClaw instance.
Yeah.
And I'm disappointed to hear, because I was kind of excited about maybe checking out myclaw.ai myself today. Yeah. But I'm a little disappointed to hear that it's very expensive to do it that way.
Well, it's like anything else, how much of it is just learning, and, do I need to burn through $10 to learn how to use it better and more efficiently? I think there's some of that. And, it has been pretty reactive to, you're right, I don't need to read all of this all the time. So there's we talked about this on the show, right? It's like, it is the memory conundrum, right? Which is, no, you don't want, and you've brought up many companies and research papers that are based in this. It's such a big deal, but it's like, no, we don't want all-knowing memory. It's just compute intensive. Now, at some point where latency and compute drop to such a low dollar figure, we're talking about fractions upon fractions of a cent. Sure, you might say to yourself, but what does it matter if my memory has 2 terabytes on it, or that it pulls in a half a gigabyte every single time it answers another question? You and I might be sitting here 3 years from now and going, this is not a problem anymore. They've solved for this. But in today's world, tokens matter, costs matter, your premier models matter. And so what I set out to do with my claw as a test was to build a faceless CRM, essentially, that could fully do lead generation on its own by going out and connecting to the right tools and building that system. And I have seen some hints of that's interesting, because basically what it said was, Greg will love this. Like, you don't need the CRM. Karl has talked about that. And I don't think that's right for everybody, but in my particular case, the use case was a team of one, and so it was to go out and do lead gen. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. It's just interesting. It's a tool, like everything else, you have to learn a little bit, you have to understand a little bit, but I'm cautious right now because it does move very quickly through money, and there's got to be a solve for that. Yeah.
And so myclaw.ai is this cloud-based alternative for those of us who don't want to buy a Mac Mini, or which is really happening in large response to the OpenClaw viral bloom that's happening, right? So that there is a real surge in demand for Mac Minis, because Mac Minis are really well designed to do a separate sort of agent platform using the OpenClaw standards. So there's enormous marketplaces that are emerging around this. We talked last week extensively about Molt Book, which was this interesting experiment where agents only can, purportedly only agents, but not humans, can be involved in a social network that's fashioned on Reddit, and they can go in there and humans can observe what conversations and what developments are happening among this very large number of agents there. But that's kind of like a toy over there, a distraction compared to what's really being built as infrastructure to support this kind of open claw system of agents. So, for example, there are these skill hubs that are forming. One of them is called Claw Hub. Another one's called Molt Hub. So you can expand the capability of your open claw Molt, or whatever they're going to call them.
Whatever name, yeah.
Right. And again, one of the major distinctions for OpenClaw is that it has been purposely designed at the outset to have a communication channel to you that meets your already existing communication channel. So if you can talk to it on WhatsApp or what are all the other ones that people talk on? I'm not sure.
Telegram, WhatsApp. Those are WhatsApp. I mean, look, again, we always say this from the States. For us that live in the States now, Beth, maybe differently in Canada, but WhatsApp is just a small app of things, in terms of the States. And immediately, as soon as you get off the plane,
globally, it's huge.
Like Europe, forget about it. That's how. In fact, I was just this trip that we're taking, my wife and I, for our 20th anniversary. It's coming up, and we're looking at day personal drivers, day trips, walking tours, you name it, for Lisbon. It just happened to be one of the cities we'll be in, and right there was like, connect with me on WhatsApp. That's how you do business. In fact, money is exchanged through WhatsApp. That's totally normal and secure and private and known to be, suitable. So we don't use it as much here, but it being connected and being able to work through WhatsApp is kind of a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, Meta owns WhatsApp.
Yep.
So that's another reason why Zuckerberg was so interested in getting Peter Steinberger to join Meta. And the anecdote is that almost immediately, like when OpenClaw saw its surge in the recent months, Mark Zuckerberg was personally experimenting with it and in conversation, on the back end, DMing with Peter Steinberger. And that was the way the courtship emerged. To my knowledge, go ahead, Beth.
Well, this is this is like the B story of Meta in the entire AI story, right? The B story is we go and look. I think Mark Zuckerberg alone in his giant mansion, being the one who can see the future and knows that it's amazing, and so does all of the things. Like, let's do this. And inevitably, not everyone, but a lot of people go, wow, yeah, but not with you. Sorry. Right?
Well,
so go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, I don't know that I'm not this guy, Peter, so maybe I don't know. But when you look at my claw and what it is, I don't personally see a massive moat around it. So the reality is, like, to me, it was more of a concept of how this would work, but it's also a bit in the open. And so what would stop all the best engineers and AI people at Meta from doing exactly the same thing through Meta? I mean, I would imagine Google would be doing the same thing, or Anthropic is kind of doing the same thing with when you look at cowork. So while extremely impressive, I think it's like, 3.5 came out and OpenAI was a clear leader, but then very quickly other major players caught up. And so I don't really think this is something that's like, in sense of him joining OpenAI, I don't get the impression that this is a big get in terms of well, nobody else will have this technology. I don't get that
No,
impression. Maybe I'm wrong, but
it's not the function, it's the story. It
yeah,
is
right. Yeah, sure.
ChatGPT, right? Like it is
Yeah.
literally ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said, "Come be ChatGPT with us," and Pete said, "Yes." Now,
Yeah, no, you're right.
I think I think the sort of the backstory of both organizations is also interesting because OpenAI was open, right, and then went toward profit, but didn't, I think, make overt promises, or Zuckerberg would say it wasn't a promise. We never promised we'd do it forever, but didn't start. It doesn't have the same kind of we committed that Llama would be open source as we went through and developed it. And then in the middle said, no, we're not going to make this one open source for whatever reasons. Right. I mean, that may
Yeah.
have been a wise decision for business or safety, or like we could have that conversation, but literally it was open source. That was the plan, and then it wasn't. And that's a very recent meta story, and it isn't a very recent OpenAI story.
So
I will
let
say
me,
there was other news. This is just another news story, but I can't find it, so I can't read it word for word. But anyway, the gist of it was somebody who has tracked and watched like updates and financial updates and things like that for OpenAI has shown over the course of the last 2-3 years that some serious words have been washed from it in terms of security, openness, good for all, these kind of things. I'm paraphrasing. That's not the words. But Beth, you've talked about this for a while about, like OpenAI is not, its original charter is not really where they are today. And somebody, what I love about this is people are using AI to track AI companies and hold them accountable. And one of the things this person, I just can't remember if it was a TikTok or I saw it in one of the news things, but I can't find it. But the gist of it was, year over year over year, some of these words are disappearing from their legal wording. And
Right.
that's something we, Greg is saying, like, just like Google did. I'm not suggesting that this is a one-off, but
No,
interesting
right.
nonetheless.
The fact that it's a pattern
Yeah.
with many of the labs that are developing the models that may affect everything in our future.
Yeah. I mean, AGI for everybody, and all of a sudden a couple of years later, and it's like, well, no, we didn't mean everybody. It's like, here's what we meant by AGI for everybody. Now that we have these other things, these other irons in the fire.
Right.
So yeah, for sure.
Right.
So I want to mention one last thing about the OpenAI decision, not the decision by OpenAI, but the decision to go to OpenAI by Peter Steinberger. And that is, you have these two major companies. They have enormous potential with the consuming public out there. Similarly, billions, scale access to customers, and all of those customers and all the enterprises that they play with as well are going to be interested in autonomous agents. And so this is a very important marriage that's going on. So now there are two suitors. One of them is Meta, which has done a bunch of moves and reversals and poaching, and it seems like that as soon as somebody joins them, that half of them run away. Run away. It's so dysfunctional. Yeah. And yet it's very powerful. And on the other hand, you've got OpenAI, which has continued to be, I think, a magnet for really high-end aspirational leadership in what's happening in AI. And it seems that it's a very motivating and intellectually stimulating place to work, because there are so many elements to it, and all of them are doing incredible things. Now, here's Peter saying, where am I going to go? And it's such an obvious choice. I mean, why would anyone take a personal risk in their sort of choice of partner and go to Meta at this point just because of all of the red flags that have emerged. So I just wanted to say that. But now I want to switch. I want to go ahead and comment on that. But I want to talk about Google MCP,
yes,
the web MCP thing, how it relates to agents, and why that's also a very important announcement.
So I just want to put a tiny cherry on the top of that statement, because in addition to all of the things that Andy said about the vision and the environment and how great that is, he also prefers Codex over OpenClaw. Over Opus.
Yeah.
Everybody starts with O now. I don't know what's happening. But so it's a great environment, and it is the home of his most favorite coding partner. It just seems
there's a vibe there, right? Okay, so WebMCP, it was announced by Google, okay, and this is moving us closer to the ability of agents to work kind of seamlessly across the web on websites that you currently navigate to and employ. So what's the difference? Like we've talked on this show before about how the early browser agents, Comet, Atlas, etc., were doing what amounts to pixel analysis to try to figure out how to operate a website, and then they would take actions at the pixel level on the screen. So they had to be looking at the screen and so on. Well, then we talked about DOM, D-O-M, Document Object Model, which exists, and you can instrument your website so that all of the tools and elements, the action elements, the buttons, the modal windows, everything else, those are a part of a model that can be read by an agent, and that bypasses the requirement to look at the pixels and try to figure out the page first and then act like a human who's never used the web before and try to figure out where to click the cursor and then what buttons to press. So DOM, I had said, was going to be the next kind of wave of, for action-oriented browser agents. Nah, Google comes out with WebMCP. So how is that different? Well, instead of using DOM, the low-level representation of the nodes on the web page, which agents have to kind of figure out, WebMCP gives high-level action interfaces to agents. So you can, for example, it's a new standard and API that any website developer can add to it. It's kind of a turnkey package. And you can expose these structured action objects on the thing. They're functions with JSON schemas. And they have return types, and you expose those to the agents directly. So what can you do with that? Well, imagine that an agent can call a high-level action like checkout now, right? That's going to be a little package that's a skill on the website that the website can then, activate. You could filter results. You could say filter all of the search results on this page, or you can create a web ticket, on GitHub or any of those things. Instead of having to guess which DOM elements you have to act on and then click in the correct order, now the website has its own way of saying, here are the high level things that you can do on this website, and here are the commands to invoke each one of those.
In a similar type story to that, at least in terms of websites, Cloudflare came out a couple days ago introducing Markdown for agents. And what it's basically doing, I'll say, like it says, this blog post you're reading takes 16,180 tokens in HTML and 3,150 tokens when converted to Markdown. That's an 80% reduction in token usage. So what Cloudflare has done, in the same sense of what you're saying, like Google's making it easier for websites to work in this modern agentic world. Cloudflare is also saying, like, look, one of the biggest issues is if you need to go and look at the HTML of a site that is resource heavy. And so they've basically simplified this with like a markdown, and it's just markdown. We've seen, markdown files. Well, Claude Code writes MD files all the time, but we've been writing them for years now. And it's feeding that into AI instead of like a letter by letter. So it's
I'm glad you
basically
pointed
breaking
out that efficiency advantage, because WebMCP from Google can perform at a very high accuracy level. So like a checkout could be completed with 98% accuracy, where a browser agent might flub it, halfway through. But by shifting from examination of pixels to this structured schema approach, WebMCP cuts the computational overhead by 70%.
Yeah.
So it uses only 30% of the tokens basically to do that. You can imagine how token intensive it is for a web browser to be using AI to try to figure out what the pixels on that page are.
Yeah.
And
it
puts it back in the realm of language, and even better, back in the realm of computer-friendly language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Markdown. And if we go back to the JSON, right, for the MCP, it gets more and more computer-friendly. What's happening now is that it takes a screenshot, then it analyzes a screenshot, and then tries to decide what's happening with the screenshot. I mean, we all know that when you move from visual to text-based, that's an inherent speed up and better result. Fewer problems, fewer interpretation problems.
And look, the overarching, thing that's happening here is that, we all lived through the era of optimizing websites for mobile, right? And that wasn't nothing. That's really hard to make a wide website work really well. And we've all seen a really good mobile version of a website and thought, yeah, I thought somebody put some effort into that because this works so well, and things are exactly where you would expect them to be. That's no easy feat. Well, now what we're seeing is websites, whether us as humans see it on the front end or not, is sort of irrelevant. What we want is this optimization for the agents. And an exact example of what you just said, Beth, I work with Claude Code daily, and it will open up the MCP Chrome browser and do exactly what you said. Well, let me see what's going on. Now, it's pretty good with its snapshots because it is giving it some sort of sense of what it's on there. Oh, I see that the slider doesn't work or whatever. But that's like archaic compared to what it could be with some of these newer tools. Because if Claude Code does not need to take a snapshot, and by the way, there's times where that may make sense visually. What does the UI UX look like? That totally makes sense if that's what you're working on as colors and moving things around. But if it's just a fundamental understanding on the back end of what's going on in the HTML and how can I do this efficiently, I imagine this is something you would want immediately inside of Cloud. I would want it immediately inside of Cloud Code. It's like, hey, Cloud Code, you go figure out how you need to look at this website. That is different than how I perceive the website, but that's totally fine. We're working together.
So let me describe, specifically how Claude Code looks at my other, tabs through the the Claude MCP view. And it says, okay, wait, let me take a snapshot and take a look at Lovable. Okay. So I'm working in Lovable over here. And so it's looking at Lovable. And then it says, okay, I'm going to scroll down in the chat and see what else was discussed. Well, I guess and then I can see it jump around. Like the browser is now moving around because Claude over here is working it in order to understand what the conversation prior to where I kind of ended up on the page was. So it's scrolling around and it's moving around and then it's taking snapshots of the actual, preview UI and saying it knows. It's very good. If it's using pixel examination, it's doing it brilliantly because it can see details of the UI that even I didn't notice.
Yeah.
Right.
And it will correct those. So but that's the way it works right at the moment. Now you can imagine if WebMCP happens, if you're looking at the UI of a preview that you're working on as a code, or an application developer, then you'll want to have a visual, interface for your agent that way. But if you're asking an agent to go out and, search for and then fill up a cart and shop for you, right now that is very compute intensive, and it's going to get much, much easier with this WebMCP example.
I'm with you. It all sounds good.
And that makes me wonder. So I've had AI direct me to open the console and then find sections within the console, which is, I think everybody probably knows that. But for folks who don't, it's basically looking at the code and the code language of your website. And you can look at different sections within the website in that. And there are times when I can run a tiny script on the console and get something done with the content of what I'm looking at. So it makes me wonder if what's happening now is still sort of for the human gaze, right? So that if humans come back and they're like, oh yeah, no, we experience it the way that you experience it. AI is reassuring us so that we can follow that trace. But I wonder if what we're going to move to is not just it's reading it in this JSON way or that kind of stuff. But my memory is going back to the viral video of the AI agent calling the hotel to make a reservation, and the hotel's AI agent answering, and them like, "Hey, I'm this," and then they went, "Ooh," like, is that what we're going to go to? That it's not even JSON in English or even in characters in that way. Is AI going to find a super efficient way to do all of those things?
Yeah, light. It'll be light. I mean, we see processors and things, and they get more efficient as they move off of like copper, and we've had shows about that. And it'll be some form of light energy transfer and discussion or something to be like, the most efficient way for them to talk back and forth or whatever. And look, this is like, this is why we get into the Conundrum episodes and stuff, because it's not an easy answer. You look at some of these situations and you go, okay, that's perhaps coming. How do I feel about the idea if I'm looking for, efficiency, productivity, lower inference, lower cost, whatever, as the human trying to run my business. And then the trade-off is like, well, I am now no longer in control because I cannot decipher. It's happening in different languages. It's even happening in different, not even languages at this point. It's happening in different modes of transfer of energy, that I can no longer jump in as the human and go, I'm the human in the loop. So where's the trade-off here on that? And I think we're seeing that more and more with the agents and what's going on with OpenClaw, to go back to them and stuff like that. Is it's happening at such a pace that where you put the human in the loop is becoming trickier and trickier. Where does that make sense? Obviously, but in other areas where that ends up getting in the way of the way the agents work together. So anyway, that just where my brain goes with this a lot of times is that there's going to be some hard questions coming up, where the want is going to be for agents to find magnitudes of orders of efficiency. If I have a new business, even if it's a local brick and mortar business, and I find a way, if I'm the local coffee shop and I find a way, I'm independent, I'm not a Starbucks, I'm not a chain, to use OpenClaw or MyCloud AI or however they do it, and it allows them to grow their business, through new ways and channels that just would not have been available to them. But there's trade-offs in terms of just who is it pinging, who is it going after, whatever. But the business owner goes, yeah, but there's more people coming in my door than ever before. And I'm trying to keep the lights on and keep my business up. There's going to be a lot of these like interesting one-off type of instances and conversations. And I don't know what they're going to be, but like they're coming, like these conversations are coming, and businesses are going to be, it's going to be tricky, right? Because like, how do you track that stuff? Even down to taxes and things like that. How do you make sure all your ducks in a row when your business, you weren't so involved with the day-to-day of your own local coffee shop? things were happening that maybe you did or did not know were happening. Maybe that were or were not white hat or otherwise. I just think there's a lot of
IRS auditor. I mean, he's yellow and he has a beak, and I just thought he was a duck, right? It made sense. So he was a duck. And I didn't know he was a Chinese robot duck that exposed all of my customers' stuff to, terribly sorry. It gave me fake, right?
Or,
you're
Mr. IRS,
responsible.
The duck told me you would be totally fine with this. I even asked, and it said you would have no problem with what we're doing. So there's that too. It's like trust but verify, but also people are reliant more and more. I mean, hell, there was just to jump to a different news story in this, like there was a news story about, it's one of the, I guess, major like chatbots for medical now with 40%. It said 40% of doctors are now using this service. It was a company that one of the websites, one of the newsletters was saying that we should be tracking and following. I was like, 40% is not an insignificant percentage when you're talking about all doctors being able to use this service, but it does start to, but we all used it and it said this was right. And now it's like, who's to blame, right? Is it always come back to the human? Or is there a point in some future where that's not always the case? Because the human goes, not only could I have not known this was a problem, there was nothing in my preview to know that I could have solved for this, or I could have stopped this, or whatever. It's going to be really interesting and probably a little messy in courtrooms in the future of exactly who is at fault.
Well,
so we're touching on something.
It's why judgment exists, right? Judgment exists, in a judicial judgment exists because for a bunch of reasons, but one of them is majority does not necessarily equal correct, right? Or just, or any of those things. So it is important to have a piece that like a way of judging, a way of discernment.
So we're touching on a subject that is at the core of a very interesting paper that I came across today. And it's by a couple of professors, I believe, at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. So this is the business side of the school. And it's about thinking fast and slow. There are these two systems of thinking that happen in the human mind. One of them is fast, quick, like Malcolm Gladwell's blink. You have a very immediate and intuitive kind of capacity to arrive at a conclusion. And then there's thinking slow, which is deliberative reasoning. And we're training AI at this point to be very good at this deliberative reasoning. And they may ultimately, the AIs may emerge with something akin to flash intuition that humans are capable of. But then these researchers at the Wharton School say the following. I'm going to read from the abstract here, but they're introducing a third kind of thinking that's happening because of the advent of AI. Okay, so here it is. People increasingly consult generative AI while reasoning. As AI becomes embedded in the daily thought process, what happens to human judgment? To your point, Beth. We introduce tri-system theory, extending dual process accounts of reasoning, that's system 1 and system 2, by positing system 3, artificial cognition that operates outside the brain. System 3 can supplement or supplant internal processes, introducing novel cognitive pathways. And I experience this. I now am highly reliant on the sort of outboard contributions of AI to my thinking and approach to problem solving. Okay, so the issue that arises out of this analysis that they've done is that there's a thing that they're identifying called cognitive surrender, which is where humans having too much reliance on the AI and depending on its veracity and reasoning ability end up not using their brain well enough, right? So Anyway, the very interesting paper. It's called Thinking Fast, Slow, and Artificial, How AI is Reshaping Human Reasoning. And they use this idea of the rise of cognitive surrender by humans.
I think it's all very fascinating because this goes back to, my generation growing up, and video games will ruin you. And I don't think maybe there is papers that say that's the case, but we also know how video games and children who played video games have become very, very intelligent, very smart, and very productive in their areas of expertise. And a lot of it could be attributed back to because they played video games and they were making decisions or whatever. And then, you go through the decades and there, social media, obviously, and is it rotting the brain? Is it taking away, deeper thinking levels? And now we're at AI and, there's great conversations in these papers like that. And I'll be interesting to see where this sort of nets out. I don't know that we'll know really for another decade until there's just been enough data and research done. I guess from my perspective, there are certainly things that I offload now to AI that I don't really have any cognitive load on. But I also used to have a flip phone that had the little pager thing at the top, and you still had to memorize all the numbers of your friends. So because I don't have to memorize the phone numbers of my friends, am I dumber for not having to keep that in constant, my local, recent memory? Because I offloaded it to my phone and my phone now has 400 numbers in it. And that's not really a problem. And then I contrast that with all the work I've been doing with Claude Code and also MyClaw, and other tools, and knowing the amount of effort. And the way I would describe this or that I would gauge this is having to feel like I have to step away from the computer because I'm mentally drained. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to figure out if you've got a high cognitive load going on. But if you're like, I'm exhausted, but I've been sitting here, that's usually a good indicator that your brain has been working very hard on things, right? Whatever that may be. And we all have our different levels. That can often be the way I feel with working with Claude Code, despite the fact that Claude Code is doing the lion's share of it's doing all of the coding. I'm not coding anything, but it's also helping with some of the reasoning and things like that. So is this really going to be a problem, Andy, in the future? I don't know. I don't know how to know until we know. So it's we'll have to continue to monitor, and more research papers will come out. But we might find that, just because people are working with agents and those agents now do a lot of things that, we had to do ourselves, that it doesn't necessarily deteriorate our ability to do cognitive thinking. In fact, we might find the opposite, in that people are thinking harder and deeper about things than ever before because they're not weighed down by the simple. And so they're able to free up more time for the complex. And I don't know where that leads us. I'm excited about it, though.
Yeah,
I think that part of it is also that it's we take pictures of a point in time and then we discuss that to a certain extent as though that situation isn't dynamic, right? So to your question, Brian, am I dumber because I haven't memorized these numbers?
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's probably harder for all of us to memorize a string of 9 to 12 numbers now.
Sure.
Than it was in the 1970s or the 1980s.
That's fair.
But has that created room for something that is more useful in our engagement in the world? I will also say that one of the reasons that I have spent so much time with Claude Code and haven't moved to OpenClaw, haven't tried Codex, I didn't understand it. And it was okay, I need to do this process with you too. To get really clear on how I need communication in a way that lightens my load and does not increase it, so that I am having less of that. And I will say, man, did we have a hard weekend. And Brian, my indication of that is that now I am at the computer like this. I'm like, that's a bad sign, Beth. you need to get up from the computer and move and do something else physically with your body, because it was just not happening. And that was just a
And that goes to the whole
looming.
idea of like AI fatigue, right? Like AI is making it
Yep.
possible for us to work longer. And there was that whole like sort of news story that came out last week about that. And I was like, yeah, I know, I feel that, I mean, there's a lot of fun in feeling highly efficient. There's a lot of fun in knowing that in a given workday of 8 hours, I will produce more meaningful work and make more meaningful change for my clients and coworkers than ever before. And that is because of AI. But the same can be true that that day can feel exhausting. And because AI never sleeps, there's no natural like downtime of, well, people are asleep, so we're not going to move forward on this. And AI is basically, well, I never sleep and I don't have to stop. And there's really no reason you need to stop working on this project right now, because who cares if it's 5 o'clock? I can keep working on this indefinitely and happy to do so, with no feedback. And so to that point about stepping away or walking away from the computer, I know I've had to like get better at that, of saying
Yeah.
like, yep, it's, if I stayed here for 5 more hours, there would be 5 more hours of work done. No doubt. No doubt. But
Yep.
there's times where I walk away and I go, I know the minute I walk away, Claude's going to ask me for approval. It's going to sit there for the next 3 hours because I wasn't there to look at it. And I haven't set up anything super cool for it to ping me on my phone to approve it so it keeps moving, which is
Right.
what it would be. But then I would have tied it to my phone. And now I'm never
Right.
untethered. Right. So trade off, could I keep, is there a way for me to keep Claude Code moving all the time on behalf, even when I don't want to sit at the computer? Probably. But then also what I've done is I've tethered it to my phone and now I'm chained to Claude Code. So have I really
Right.
solved the problem, Anyway. Any other news before we wrap up today, guys? Anything we must say today?
I want to say in connection to that, and I was told no, but what I really want is, hey, can you like get together with Alexa and just ask me questions? Because then I could go and do stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
go ahead and say approve. And Claude was like, no. The short answer is no, Beth.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Hey, you don't ask, you can't get it, So no, I agree with you on that though. There are times where there's a natural point where you want to walk away and you go, yeah, I could just go walk outside and, answer these questions in nature. I don't have to be at the computer to do this part of it. And I know I've felt that before too. So any other last news from you before we wrap it up?
Not for me, no.
Yeah. I mean, there was news over there. I mean, we talked about the biggest hitters and the interesting topics over the weekend. And there was a few more that I saw. I have to get better at like saving some TikToks because I see them and I'm like, oh, that's really great for the show. And then they get buried. So I have to do a better job of doing that and saving them, because people are putting out some really phenomenal content. In fact, I think what I want to do is go through and just grab all the names of all the people. When I go to what is it on TikTok? It's like For You, when it filters down to just the people you're following, I guess. I think that's right. Or maybe it's followers. I'm not a big TikTok user. I just go on and use it. But it's whatever that center one is. And then once I hit that little guy there and it changes my feed, it's like 90% AI focused. You remember do you remember what does she go by? Cat GPT? You remember Cat GPT? And she still puts out really amazing content. She just put out, if anybody goes and checks her out, go check out her, like, I don't know, whatever. I don't know when it was on TikTok. Cat GPT. She actually did a takeover of Chat GPT's account months and months and months ago, maybe even a year ago now. And she puts out really great content and it's fun. But she just did a little skit of her playing Claude Code and OpenAI. And it's really well done. She did a good job playing both sides of it. But the one line I love in it is her playing with Claude Code. She's like, well, we're just trying things out or whatever. And it understands me. And the OpenAI said, you literally told me to call you babe. I just thought it was such a great line from her. It was like OpenAI is pleading its case because it came in and caught her cheating with Claude Code. Anyway, go watch it. I love when people are super creative in that way and they take a shot, because that's not the kind of content I've seen her do before. And I love this idea that this girl, I don't know what this young woman's name is, but that she was like, oh, I know I talk a lot, but I think I want to do something that's a little more comedic, or I want to take this side by side and do it. And she did it so well. And so I thought, well, good for her. Like I love people taking a shot like that. And I found it really entertaining. So Cat GPT, CAT GPT is her handle, I believe. And you can go check her out and do that just for a good laugh, if nothing else. It was well done. So, all right, that's it for today, guys. We'll be back tomorrow on the rest of the week. Hopefully we'll have some of our other co-hosts will be around. I know there was some, as we said, some ick going on, and hopefully that's cleared up, and we'll find we'll have them back here. So more to come this week. Thanks for hanging out with us on this holiday. If it was a holiday where you were, good seeing everybody in the comments. Thank you all, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye.